If an Inuit misjudges the fire, just by 2 degrees, the ice begins to melt above his head. There is no smoke, no flame, only invisible heat. Because the moment real fire appears, the home that keeps him alive starts killing him instead. The Arctic winter, 1,000 years ago. Winds carve the frozen plains into waves of white. Breath crystallizes before it leaves the mouth. For months, the sun never rises, only a dim twilight over endless ice. Inside this void, small domes of snow glow faintly against the storm. They are homes, igloos, built from nothing but frozen air. Within them, families cook, sleep, and survive. Yet there is no wood, no metal, no spark. Most remarkably of all, there is no fire. So how did the Inuit cook inside snow shelters without melting them? The answer will shatter everything we think we know about warmth, survival, and human ingenuity. But how do we know they cooked without fire? The answer comes from the earth itself, frozen layers that have preserved every sign of life and every absence of it. Archaeologists working across Nunavut, Baffin Island, and Greenland have uncovered the remains of Inuit dwellings sealed in permafrost. Inside, they found soot marks, delicate black stains on the underside of snow blocks, and residues of oily carbon along the inner walls. There was no charcoal, no ash, no burnt bone. Across more than 60 excavated sites, not a single trace of wood or ember was found. Instead, every home revealed the same artifact: a shallow stone bowl carved from soapstone. Its rim blackens not by flame, but by steady, low heat. These were Qulliq, seal blubber lamps. They burned quietly, almost invisibly, drawing fuel from rendered fat stored in skin pouches. The wick, made of dried moss or Arctic cotton, never sparked, never smoked. Its light was soft and steady, enough to cook, to warm, and to survive. One archaeologist described it as fire domesticated into patience. Ethnographic accounts from the 19th century confirm the same practice. Explorers recorded families gathered around these lamps, each controlling the wick's length with a bone tool, trimming it to balance heat and flame. The women of the household were lamp keepers, guardians of the equilibrium between life and melting. They knew that a wick too long could bring collapse, too short, and hunger would return. In this frozen architecture, control was survival. Further analysis using infrared thermography and residue testing in the 1990s revealed lipid signatures from seal and whale fat in the soot deposits. It matched the exact combustion profile of a Qulliq lamp, producing barely 100 watts of heat, but radiant for hours. The walls of snow absorbed the warmth and reflected it back, stabilizing the temperature just below the melting point. It was an engineered balance, not an accident of tradition. No fire, no wood, no sparks. Only knowledge. Through generations, that knowledge turned frozen homes into microclimates of endurance. What outsiders once mistook for primitive huts were, in truth, thermal systems tuned with mathematical precision. Fire and snow are mortal enemies. One consumes, the other yields, and when they meet, both vanish. The igloo is not a house in the usual sense. It is a fragile equation. Geometry balanced on temperature. Each block of snow is a matrix of frozen air, trapping heat in millions of microscopic chambers. Inside, a single degree of warmth too high begins a chain reaction. The inner surface softens, droplets form, and gravity does the rest. Archaeological reconstructions show that when an open flame is introduced, the dome begins to deform in minutes. By the 10th minute, the ceiling sags. By the 30th, it collapses. Melting does not come as a gentle drip. It arrives as a silent cave-in, heavy as stone. For those inside, that mistake could mean death. Even a small ember can turn the structure against its makers. Snow, once the ally, becomes a weapon. Water seeps into cracks, refreezes into blades, and traps the heat that caused it. Within an hour, an igloo that was warm becomes an ice coffin. Every element of Inuit architecture reflects this understanding. The walls curve to guide convection. The entrance tunnel sinks lower than the living space, forcing cold air to pool below. The ceiling remains rounded to distribute stress evenly, minimizing melt lines. The interior temperature is maintained between -5 and 0 degrees Celsius, just below the point of surrender. Even the lamp's position is no accident. They are placed to cast heat outward, never upward. To modernize, such restraint feels alien. We equate comfort with abundance, safety with heat. But for the Inuit, survival meant the opposite, control, not excess. Their technology was not about conquering nature, but about negotiating with it. They built a home from ice and forbade fire within it. That decision defied instinct, yet saved lives for centuries. In the Arctic, the laws of physics write the laws of survival. And among those laws, one stands above all. The moment you forget restraint, the ice reminds you. To live inside ice, they learned to engineer heat itself. Every detail of their world, what they wore, how they sat, where they slept, was part of one seamless system designed to turn cold into endurance. Textile. Their warmth began with what they wore. Clothing was not fabric, but architecture. Layers of caribou and seal skin stitched fur to trap air, then fur to hide to block wind. Each morning, seams were resealed with frozen fat to keep moisture from penetrating. Microscopic air pockets in the fur created a gradient. Each breath, each movement, recycling heat instead of losing it. Even the thread mattered. Sinew fibers that swelled when wet, tightening every seam. These garments were living insulators, breathing with the body. Social. Warmth was also collective. Families slept together, pressed shoulder to shoulder in hide bags sewn for 2 or 3. Body heat combined, raising the interior temperature by 15 to 20 degrees Celsius without any flame. Guard shifts rotated through the night, one person awake, tending the Qulliq lamp, trimming its wick to balance the room. When one stirred, the others turned, so that no corner of the shelter ever cooled completely. In the Arctic, cooperation was not kindness, it was physics. Spatial. The igloo itself was a precision instrument. Its entrance tunneled below floor level, trapping cold air that flowed down like water. The sleeping platform rose above that layer, just high enough to inhabit a zone of warmth that never reached melting point. Above, the domed ceiling reflected radiant heat back toward the center, distributing it evenly. Even the snow was chosen carefully, cut from wind-packed drifts dense enough to insulate, but porous enough to breathe. They didn't fight the cold. They negotiated with it, creating a dialogue of temperatures. Nutrition. Heat came not only from the lamp, but from what sustained it. The Inuit diet was fuel itself, fat-rich, calorie-dense, efficient. 2,000 to 3,000 kilocalories a day, drawn from seal, whale, and fish, metabolized directly into internal warmth. Cooking was slow, a simmer of blubber over the Qulliq, never a blaze. Every meal became a calibration between hunger and preservation. To outsiders, it looks primitive. To physicists, it's genius. They achieved thermal equilibrium inside a house of ice, using nothing but fur, fat, air, and trust. In the Arctic, wisdom was not in invention, but in restraint. When spring breaks the grip of ice, the Arctic changes its breath. The endless white fractures into mirrors of meltwater, and the people move, leaving the igloos behind. They traveled toward the coast, following the promise of open sea and seal migration. Here, fire returns. Along the stony beaches of the Hudson Strait and the fjords of Baffin Island, archaeologists have mapped more than 200 ancient coastal sites. Each one tells the same story. Foundations of turf huts, hearthstones blackened with soot, traces of charred bone and melted fat. Cooking, repair, trade, storytelling all took place here, in the brief season when flame could be free. Summer camps were vast networks, 50 hectares or more, part workshop, part kitchen, part university of survival. Here they rendered seal oil, dried meat and fish, repaired tools, carved new soapstone pots. Every task was preparation for the next, long dark. Fire, for a few months, was a teacher again. But even on shore, its use followed strict rules. Lamps were placed low against the wind, flames shielded by curved stones to prevent waste. Each family kept a blubber ledger, a record of how much fat was burned and how much stored for the winter. Elders spoke of fuel as if it were time itself. Every drop wasted meant 1 hour less of warmth in the months to come. Fire was not abundance, it was rationed wisdom. When autumn returned, so did the migration inland. The Qulliqs were packed, the fires extinguished. Only the memory of heat remained, carried in skins, in tools, in knowledge. The cycle repeated endlessly: darkness, endurance, release. Each year they refined the balance between restraint and freedom. In our world, we think of progress as invention, of mastery as control. But for the Inuit, mastery was rhythm. Their civilization pulsed with the seasons, never conquering, only synchronizing. They knew there is a time for flame and a time for snow. And that wisdom kept them alive where reason says life should not exist. The paradox of the Arctic is that survival never came from strength. It came from restraint. While other civilizations sought power in expansion and fire, the Inuit found theirs in stillness and ice. Compare this to the temperate empires of the past, the Romans who fed furnaces to forge their dominance, or the medieval builders who raised cathedrals by burning forests. Everywhere else, heat meant progress, but here, fire was the forbidden art. To survive, they inverted the logic of the world. They built comfort from cold and light from reflection. Modern scientists have begun to rediscover what the Inuit always knew. Architects now study the igloo's geometry to model passive heating systems. Thermal engineers use its structure to teach equilibrium design, how to retain warmth without combustion. What was once dismissed as primitive is now a blueprint for sustainability. In laboratories from Copenhagen to Vancouver, 3D printed snow domes and soapstone lamps prove a simple truth. Restraint, when designed, becomes intelligence. There is a quiet beauty in that. In an age obsessed with endless energy, the Inuit remind us that less can mean survival, and patience can mean progress. They never measured success by how bright the flame burned, but by how long the snow endured around it. Their legacy is not a tale of endurance alone. It is a manual for balance. They chose restraint over force, adaptation over conquest, balance over comfort, And in doing so, they revealed a deeper kind of power, the ability to live with the world, not against it. As the ice melts under our centuries' fires, their silence speaks louder than ever. It tells us that wisdom is not in what we ignite, but in what we preserve. The story of the Inuit is the story of humanity learning humility, to know when to burn and when simply to breathe.